With noses, there's so much going on. It's such a big feature right in the center of the face with so many different elements combined, it can give you a real headache. That's why in this video, I'll do my best to give you 5 quick and easy tips for drawing noses, which will hopefully make you draw better portraits. So without further ado, let's jump right in. And tip number 1 is for the nose shape. When you're sketching a nose, it's easy to get carried away by wanting to draw one nicely curved, very defined line. Oftentimes, you already envision how you want the nose to look like. Just to give a generic example, a lot of artists want to draw this nice, cute nose with a tiny tip. But by focusing on a very specific shape immediately, it takes away a lot of flexibility from you, and instead of constructing noses with one simple, continuous line, try to treat it like an actual 3D object, and I suggest dividing the construction into 3 important segments. I always pinpoint the glabella, followed by the actual nasal body, and by the tip of the nose. And I use mostly straight lines instead of curved ones. This is super useful to simplify shapes, and you can then later on easily turn straight lines into curves, but the other way around doesn't work. At this stage, I only focus on a basic shape I can build up to take care of my proportions. The individual nose specifics don't matter at this stage. The most important part is to nail the tilt and length of the nasal body. Once you have the rough shape mapped out, you can dive into more details and round things up or make them stand out more. I personally really like noses which look a bit different and have an unusual shape. I think they're absolutely beautiful and unique. It doesn't always have to be the perfect tiny nose. Before we continue, let's have a quick look at this week's community portrait. I did this portrait sketch in I think 40 minutes, and I absolutely love that photo. It has a lot of beautiful, strong shadows, and if you recognize yourself, say hi in the comments. And if you want me to draw you, you can submit selfies on my Instagram, SallyDraws, either DM me or use the hashtag DrawMeSally, and I'm picking one each week. Now back to the video. Tip number 2 is about the nostrils. Now here, definitely don't just go crazy and draw random slits, which leave you wondering why the drawing looks weird and wacky. I would give you the tip to mark the overall proportions first. Define the overall width and length of the nose. Extra tip: the total width of the nose, including the wings, usually aligns with the inner eye corners. This is a great indicator for how wide the nose should be. The width of the nose should also be approximately the width of one eye. There are these few tiny things which can help you determine the size of the nose. Just don't rely on how you feel that day and wild guesses. Observe your reference closely and mark down a general frame in which you can place elements like the nostrils. And then don't forget, different angles give you different perspectives. You won't see the actual holes from a top view, but a bottom view will really make the full capacity of the nostrils visible. Pay close attention to the nostril shapes, as they are not just simple oval shapes. Here in the beginning, I also like to start with straight lines to determine the general shape. Tip number 3, the shading. The biggest problem I see with shading noses is 1, you just shade it around the tip of the nose because you're not overly familiar with the whole structure, and 2, to have outlines in your render drawing in the end. And I'm not talking about stylistic contour line, I'm talking about marks that are visible until the end. You kind of want to get rid of the sketching outlines during the shading process. Think of the sketch outlines as a rough guide, nothing carved in stone. tone. Not shading the nose enough will also make it look very flat and 2D. Again, think about the different levels of depth here. The nose bridge will carve inside a little bit, the nasal body shoots outwards, and the nostril wings also have their own structure and surface. The difficulty, in my opinion, lies in not undershading and not overshading all these elements. Pay attention to your reference and where the core shadow lies. Don't lose track of your main values, but at the same time, give each segment their little treatment. And again, don't forget the whole size and width of the nose. Don't try to take shortcuts by just shading underneath the tip. Shade the nose as a whole with the side planes included. And just in case you were wondering what tools I use for shading, I like to use a makeup brush for soft blending and paper stumps for smoothing out the texture. We all love what's coming after the shading, which is placing highlights. The most satisfying part by far. So of course you want to make your nose pop and add those juicy highlights. And I know it is way too easy to get addicted to this. And before you know it, your whole nose is covered in highlight. And if everything is highlighted, nothing is. You think you make noses super shiny and awesome the more light you add, but in reality it has quite the opposite effect. Try to hold back and you'll notice the less highlight you add, the more it makes the nose pop, which gives it that satisfying final touch. Usually, the only segments I highlight are parts of the nasal body and the tip of the nose. Those are the areas which stand out most, so I can give you the tip to not overdo the highlights. It also always depends on where the light source is coming from, but in the case of natural outdoor sunlight, this is where the highlights will be most of the time. Once I memorized to be sparingly with highlights in general, it just elevated my drawings. It is something I cannot repeat enough for all facial features, like the eyes and lips as well. I do have tutorials for these features as well, so you might want to check them out as well. Let me know what facial features should be next in line. I'm thinking about doing eyebrows or ears next. And my last tip for drawing noses would be to not isolate the nose. What I mean by that is to not just draw it as a separate element, but to let it merge into the face with the other features. If you just treat the nose as a 3D object, which is simply glued on top of the face, it will look flat and isolated. I always try to remind myself to include the surrounding area. For example, I think portrait drawings look much more cohesive with the nose bridge connecting onto the eyebrows through the glabella. This connection can be a subtle shadow or a prominent dark shadow shape. Same goes for the philtrum underneath the nose, which indicates the beginning of the mouth. Especially from a side angle, you can clearly see how beneficial it can look to really create this connection of nose and mouth. And both features are enhanced by it. So these were my quick tips for drawing noses. I hope you found it somewhat helpful. Let me know if you have any suggestions for more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.